Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Midlife Crisis. This is actually going to be the final episode of Midlife Crisis for this season of the podcast. This is part 2 of Bloodlines. So today we're going to be finishing the Bloodlines event, and then after that, next week we're going to be doing The Flash. And once we hit issue 0 of The Flash, which is a special issue, that'll be it. That'll be the end of season 1. I'm going to take a week's break after that, and then come back with season 2, where we'll continue from where we left off. So yeah, I thought this was a good place for this to be like the final event that we do before I take a break, because the next big event is 0 Hour, and it's like a big moment in DC. It's when they try to fix a lot of continuity and stuff. So, yeah, this episode we're finishing Bloodlines. We're gonna see. Who knows? Maybe the second half of Bloodlines is better than the first half. I'm sure there's going to be some annuals in here that are going to be a bit more enjoyable than some of the other annuals from the first part. But yeah, before we get into this, please rate the podcast, and follow the podcast if you're not following already. Share it around, let people know about it. If there's anyone you know who would be interested in listening to this, then share it around. Yeah, let's get straight into it. The first annual that we're going to be talking about today is the Justice League of America annual, because I previously said that, like, I thought the Justice League International annual was the JLI annual, but at some point, Justice League International just became Justice League America again. And then Justice League Europe, which was the spin-off, was renamed to Justice League International. So this used to be the original JLI, and now it's just JLA. If that's not confusing, because it is. Alright, let's get into it. Right, so JLA Annual 7, written by Bill Loebs with art by Greg LaRocque. So this annual is really weird and kind of gross, just like most of the Bloodlines annuals. It follows this guy named Jack Mobley, who is, his life just sucks. Everything about his life sucks. He fails every job, he gets fired, he loses his wife ends up with another guy, and his daughter too. So he just ends up alone, just a massive loser. And then while he's out being a loser and feeling down and depressed, he meets Lizzie, one of the alien parasites, the one that can make men fall in love with her. And so they go back to her place, and, like, because she tricks him into thinking that, like, her brother was killed, even though she was the one that killed him. So he takes her back. So she takes him back to her place, and then they start making out. And then he, meanwhile on the TV, Booster Gold is talking about, like, the parasite situation, and, like, to be careful that there are parasites and that they can look like humans. But Jack isn't listening because he's too busy hanging out with Lizzie. And so Lizzie sucks out his spine, and then one of the other parasites shows up. I think her name is Venev. So Venev shows up. She's the one with, like, multiple arms, and she's green. She also sucks out his spine at the same time. They both do it, and that's when he loses consciousness completely. So they leave his dead body behind, and then he transforms into this dude with, like, long grey hair and stuff. And he discovers that he has the ability to mutate people into their worst nightmares, because he touches his what's the name of the like, he touches his, like, rank guy, and, like, the guy turns into, like, this weird fly-looking thing and runs away. And basically this just leads to Jack going down, like, a slippery slope of, like, becoming the first of these new characters to kind of veer more towards being a villain than a hero. because he starts accidentally, like, he goes to his doctor and he turns his doctor into a monster and his doctor's assistant into a monster by accident, and then he goes outside and he accidentally turns a bunch of people into monsters, and then he starts to realize what his powers are, and he's like, I'm gonna go see my wife, and I'm gonna get my wife back from that dude. So he goes to her house and he turns the guy into a monster. And then he accidentally touches his wife and turns her into, like, this fire, like, she gets set on fire and becomes, like, this fire demon thing. And then he accidentally touches his daughter and turns his daughter into, like, a little bat creature. And it's really messed up. He basically just ruins his life even further. Meanwhile, the JLA are doing their thing. They're fighting parasites. Guy Gardner, Fire, and Booster Gold are all fighting Angon, one of the parasites, the red one. Meanwhile, Blue Beetle is, like, Ted Kord is depressed because of what happened with Superman, you know, after Superman's death. Blue Beetle got really badly hurt by Doomsday, so he's kind of been really depressed, and Wonder Woman is a member of the JLA at the moment, so she's kind of keeping tabs on him and, like, making sure he's okay. Booster Gold has, like, a suit of armor now because of the fight with Doomsday. He made his own armor so that he could fight things now, because he realized that his old suit wasn't good enough, so he's, like, upgraded himself. So they're fighting Angon, and then eventually they hear about Jack and, like, him turning people into monsters and stuff, so they go to fight him, and, like, they go after him, and they chase him into this department store, but all of the people in the department store get turned into monsters, so they have to deal with them, and then Lizik shows up, and they have to fight Lizik. So they're fighting, like, these people turned into monsters and the parasites at the same time. Meanwhile, Jack has had enough, and he's decided that he wants to get revenge on the JLA. Like, because he sees them, like, they're all acting like heroes and stuff, and he's like, because my life sucks so much, I'm gonna make your life suck too. So he decides to, like, the JLA are starting a rally against the parasites, where they're going to, like, bring a bunch of people together to get their morale up and help fight. And Jack plans on turning everyone at the rally into monsters and then turning them against the JLA. The JLA are also teaming up with more new characters that are introduced in this. Not only is Jack introduced, but there are 3 other characters introduced. This is the first time that they refer to themselves as the New Bloods, which is the name that all these new characters created by the parasites will be called from now on. There's Shadow Strike, there's Slingshot, and there's Crag. Not important in terms of, like, who they are, because they are literally pre-established already. So they show up to help the JLA. They don't do anything. Jack puts on his own costume and starts calling himself Terrasmith because he's the blacksmith of creating terrors. He turns the entire crowd into monsters at the rally and then tells them to attack the JLA, but he can't control the monsters. They just run away, and he's like, oh, I just assumed that I'd be able to control them because I created them. And that's when Wonder Woman just convinces him to help them. And Jack's just like, okay, I'll help you. I won't be a villain anymore. Let's go fight the parasites together. And so he discovers that, like, he can actually use his powers to help people. So he can either turn them into monsters, or if he's not thinking negatively, he can improve their powers and turn them into a form that's actually going to help. So he does that to, like, Fire and Oberon and Max, and, like, turns them all into, like, powered up versions of themselves. And they all go and fight the parasites alongside Guy Gardner and Booster Gold, and they overwhelm the parasites, and so they have to run away. And then Jack, after that, disappears, and everyone loses their powers that Jack had given them. And that's where the annual ends. It ends with the JLA teaming up with Jack, beating the parasites, Jack escaping on a bus to go and continue being the Terrasmith somewhere else. Overall, I'd say this annual wasn't terrible. It was very weird and, like, gross, because the transformations in this are really disgusting. I'd say it's worth checking out just for that, because it's just a really weird issue. But yeah, it's just JLA, so if you like Guy Gardner and Booster Gold and and Wonder Woman and stuff, like, you'll probably enjoy this because it's just them, but in Bloodlines. They are definitely the best part of this. It's not the Bloodlines stuff is the worst part. The Jack stuff, the Terra Smith stuff, the fact that it introduces 4 of these new bloods instead of just 1. It's like, 1 is enough, bro. Like, you don't need to introduce 4 new characters, 3 of which don't even have actual backstories. Like, I think Shadow Strike is like, my family was slaughtered by the parasites and I got these powers, and that's his backstory. They don't even have names. And Crag is like, I was a foreman and then I became this guy. I became this big rock. This dude made out of rocks. He's basically just a Thing ripoff. But yeah, that was the JLA annual. The next annual we're going to be talking about is Adventures of Superman Annual 5. Okay, so the Adventures of Superman Annual 5 is surprisingly important to the overall plot of Bloodlines because this is the annual where we finally find out what the parasites' true goal is, because they have a goal besides just eating people's fluids. There's a reason they're eating people's fluids, and we find that out in this issue. So, at the time that Adventures of Superman is happening, Superboy is the lead character of this title. Obviously, he is a clone of Superman, and he is currently acting as if he is Superman, because all of these different Supermen believe that they are Superman. So Superboy is like, I am Superman, reborn in a new body. There's also an interesting thing about the character that is created in this one, because not only are they one of the few characters who is still alive, but I believe that they were inspiration for another character that would become very popular in the later years. And I think that Carl Kessel and Tom Grummett deserve credit for this character because of the character that you created in this one. Because I feel like this was a clear inspiration for that character, and I'll get to that in a second. So, most of this issue follows these 2 characters named Harry and Donna Carol Force, who is short for DC, get it? They're members of this family called, like, the Canadian Family Force, who are, like, a family of metahumans, but Donna is not a metahuman, but she wants to be a metahuman, like her family. So Harry and Donna come to Metropolis because they hear about the parasites that give people powers, and they want to find a parasite so that Donna can get her spine sucked out and get powers. Like, they're the first people who are trying to find these things on purpose. Meanwhile, Superboy is recruited by Maggie Sawyer in order to investigate people being killed. This is the first time in a while that we've seen all the parasites join together, like Praetor and Angon and everyone come together as one. They're trying to find so they, like, buy this place in Precinct 13 because they want to lure people there. They say that it's a place for, like, donating food so that people will come, and then the food is actually for them. Because they're going to eat everyone that shows up. So they buy this place, they eat all the people that sold it to them, and then, they start their little business. They start, like, recruiting people to help, like, get food to come in. Secretly, they want to eat them. Superboy, aka Connor Kent, I think is the name that he's going by at the moment. I don't actually think he's going by Connor yet. I think he's just going by Superboy. I don't know. I don't remember them saying his name in this at all. He investigates. He goes to, like, Bobowski's bar, and Bibbo figures out that he's a kid and kicks him out. Eventually, he figures out where the parasites are at Precinct 13, so he goes there in order to fight them. But when he gets there, Donna and Harry are already there. Harry, by the way, has the ability to turn into, like, a giant werewolf character. He's kind of cool, to be honest. So Donna and Harry find the parasites, and Donna gets her spine sucked out like she wanted. And when she gets her spine sucked out, she becomes a character who will be known as Sparks. Now, Sparks looks exactly like Livewire. Like, exactly the same. Like, light blue skin, electrical hair coming out the back, a black, like, leotard costume, like pitch black, with, like, kind of like a lightning strike cut out of it, just like Livewire. Like, she's Livewire. And she was created 3 years before Bruce Timm helped create Livewire. And I'm thinking, I think Bruce Timm just copied this character. Like, I think Bruce Timm, like, either read Bloodlines or, like, read another issue with, like, Sparks in it and just made a... But there's no credit in, like, Livewire's wiki pages or anything saying that Livewire is, like, was based on Sparks. I think Bruce Timm just copied this character and made Livewire, and then, like, I think Kyle Kessel and Tom Grummett deserve credit on Livewire, because I think Livewire was literally just, was heavily influenced by Sparks. So I think they deserve co-credit for creation of Livewire. Yeah, that's what I think. And the fact that, like, Sparks was introduced in a Superman comic and Livewire was introduced in a Superman show, like, the connections are just it's too coincidental for them not to have been, like, for Livewire not to have, like, if Livewire wasn't inspired by Sparks in any way, form, shape or form, I would be shocked. Like, look it up. Look up a picture of Sparks and tell me that that is not just Livewire. It's insane. Like, I think there's straight up plagiarism to an extent. Because, yeah, they have different names, but they are essentially the same character. But yeah, she becomes Sparks, and she helps Superboy fight the parasites, and then the parasites escape. And now that Donna has powers, she can join her family, and they can be a superhero family. Meanwhile, we learn about the true plan of the parasites, which is that the reason they are sucking out people's fluids is that it's being poured into this giant hole in the sewers, and they talk about how this thing known as the Taker will rise once they gain enough fluid, and when the Taker rises, it will ravage planet Earth. And so that is the true plan. They're sucking out all these fluids so that the Taker will be awakened, and the Taker is like their god or their supreme leader. So that is what we're building to. So we now know that they are trying to wake the Taker, whatever that is. I'm guessing it's just a giant parasite. And yeah, that was the Adventures of Superman annual. It was okay. I think this one was definitely at least a little bit more enjoyable because it's at least, like, it's quite important because it's the first annual that establishes what the Bloodlines, like, what the true plot of Bloodlines is, like, what the real end goal for the parasites is. So the fact that it establishes that is really good. It makes this one of these annuals where it's like, you actually have to read this one. The other ones, it's kind of like, you don't have to read them. This one, you kind of do, because it's the first one that establishes that. But yeah, now that we're done with that annual, the next annual that we're going to be talking about is Hawkman Annual 1, which was Hawkworld ended and they renamed it Hawkman because Hawkwoman is no longer a part of this series. Like, they've split up, so now it's just Hawkman by himself. So I'm going to be talking about his first annual and the introduction of a new character, Mongrel. And it looks like on the cover that they're going to be fighting Lilith, or Lizak, as she's sometimes known. But people love Lizak. She seems to be like the main parasite because she's in a lot of these annuals. Alright, Hawkman Annual 1. This one isn't very good, because it's incredibly dull. It's just like, John Ostrander was just doing what he had to do, which was create a new character and have Hawkman fight, one of the parasites with this new character, and that's basically what the whole issue is. It's set up for this new character, where we get to see their backstory, and then the rest of the issue is just Hawkman and Mongrel, who is the new character, fighting Lizak. But the problem with Mongrel is that, like, his whole character is seated in, like, it's like John Ostrander trying to do commentary on, like, racism, but, like, it's really hard to do that when you're a white guy. Like, it's really hard to do a whole character whose backstory is about being, like, because the whole thing about Mongrel is basically, he grew up as a troubled teenager, and everyone hates him in his neighborhood because he's half black and I don't want to. I don't want to get this wrong. I do say earlier on what he is. He's half black, and I think he's half Korean. So he's half black and he's half Cambodian, and this causes him problems in his life because he was born to a Cambodian woman and a black man from America, an African American, and yeah, they had a kid, and that was Joshua Zahn, who the reason he even calls himself mongrel is because that's what he sees himself as, because he's treated that way by everyone, and he gets beaten by like his granddad for being half black and half Cambodian, and it's just depressing. This issue is just depressing. And eventually this leads to, like, the parasites attack, and Joshua comes into confrontation with Lizik, and then he gets his spine sucked out. But that's also how he meets Hawkman, because Hawkman beats him in the past, because Hawkman was there when he got his spine sucked out. So the main story actually takes place, like, 9 months later. Or, like, 6 months later. So it's like, what is even happening? Because, like, I don't know. It jumps all over the place, because it starts off at, like, he's a baby. And then we jump ahead of time and he's in high school, and it's apparently 9 months before the main story takes place with Hawkman and Mongrel teaming up. And then we see the moment that, like, Mongrel gets his powers. I don't like calling him that because it's derogative. It came from derogatory. Joshua got his powers, but that's still a flashback. So was that, like, the day before? I don't know. John Ostrander just, like, decided to make things way more complicated by having the story take place after he already got his powers, but then show us getting his powers. Like, why couldn't he just have the story take, like, the whole story is just Joshua Zahn does not have powers, and then he gets them, and he meets Hawkman, and then that leads to them fighting. Why did he have to do this alternate route of, like, oh, he already has powers, and then we find out how he got his powers, even though we already know how he got his powers? Like, we know what gave it to him, but, like, you gotta show it anyway. I don't know. This whole issue is just confusing the read. It's just full of flashbacks that, like, make it way too complicated. Yeah, character's backstory is just way too, like, depressing for no real reason, you know? Where it's just, like, suddenly this issue is just all about, like, racism and quote-unquote half-breeds. That's what they call him. They call him a half-breed. It's just not nice. It's just not enjoyable to read. It's just, this whole issue is just dark and, like, ugh. There's also some confusing stuff with Hawkman in this, where, like, people call him Kadar Hall, but, like, he acts as if that isn't his name, and I'm not reading Hawkman, so I don't know what's going on. So it's just like, okay, who is it? Kadar Hall? Is it Carter Hall? Did Kadar Hall die, and now he's been reincarnated? We do see a flashback of Shiera getting killed, so, like, there's no explanation. Like, John Ostrander doesn't even bother to explain why he isn't going by the name Katar anymore. Like, how did he lose his memory? I know, you're gonna probably have to read the Hawkman title to find out, but if I'm only reading this annual, why even make it a point in the story of this annual if that's the only one I'm gonna be reading? You know, a lot of people reading it are only reading that one thing. They're not reading Hawkman. You know, so it's usually best when you're doing annuals to keep the main story out of it so that you don't confuse readers who are only reading that because it's a part of the event. But anyway, that's enough about Hawkman Annual 1. I don't want to talk about it anymore because it sucks. Don't read it. We're going to move on to a different annual. The next annual that we're going to be doing is the Deathstroke. Deathstroke the Terminator Annual. The last Deathstroke Annual that we did for Eclipso wasn't very good. Let's hope that this one's better. So, Deathstroke Annual 2, guest starring brand new character Gunfire. This one follows Venev, which is the parasite with the multiple arms, the green one. Basically what happens is Deathstroke is Slade Wilson. Deathstroke is in Nepal dealing with a gang, and then once he's done dealing with them, he heads back to Africa, but on the way he lands in Paris. And Venev attacks an airport and a plane there, kills one of the guys there, and then one of the other guys accidentally locks Venev in the plane and takes off, and he doesn't realize that his friend is dead, and so Venev ends up in Paris, which leads into the overall story. So, while in Paris, Deathstroke goes to visit an old friend, Gunther Van Horn, and his son, Andrew Van Horn. And so Gunther was apparently saved by Slade in the past, even though he was introduced in this annual. So Len Wein tries to weave him into Deathstroke's story. Because this is written by Len Wein, by the way, not Marv Wolfman, which is why it's better than what Marv Wolfman probably would have done during the 90s, but not as still not great, you know. So yeah, Gunther is building a ballistic suit for Deathstroke, Slade Wilson, some equipment for him. Meanwhile, his son Andrew has been trying to pitch him an idea for a special battle armor that he's been making that has weaponry and stuff, but his father just keeps shaking him off and being no. And so Andrew is getting feeling defeated because his father isn't allowing him to use his ideas. And so Venev attacks Gunther in his apartment later, or in his office, and kills Gunther. And then Andrew walks in and gets attacked by Venev as well, and he gets his spine sucked out. And Andrew wakes up having lost his memory, but then he sees his father, and that brings back some of his memory, and he remembers who he is. But he doesn't remember how his dad died, and he thinks that it's Deathstroke that killed his dad. So he goes and puts on his own ballistic armor, the one that he's been trying to get his dad to help him build. The spinal tap that he got, it didn't really it does give him powers. I almost said it didn't give him powers. It does. His powers are pretty forgettable. He gets agility and stuff like that, and then later on we would discover that Gunfire, which is the name that he goes by, Andrew gains the ability to turn anything into a gun. So he can grab a stick and shoot energy out of it, but then whatever he uses gets destroyed. So he is fighting Deathstroke with a knife, and then he realizes that he can shoot energy blasts out of the knife, and then the knife gets destroyed afterward. So that's his ability. It's pretty dumb. Not entirely useful, I don't think, especially because whatever he has gets destroyed. So if he's in a situation where he runs out of things to grab, he's dead. He won't be able to do anything. If he has things with him and they all just get destroyed, he's gonna die because he can't do anything else other than that. He's still a regular dude. So he tries to kill Deathstroke because he thinks Deathstroke killed his dad, but eventually he and Deathstroke discover Venev was the one behind it, so they team up against Venev and they fight Venev, and then as what happens in other annuals, Venev gets away, and Deathstroke and Gunfire decide to go their separate ways, and Gunfire decides that he needs to continue being a hero, and he'll show up later in Bloodlines. But yeah, that's basically the entire annual. Um, Better than the Hawkman one for sure. Um, Definitely lower on the tier. Like, a lot of these annuals are just very, very mid. Like, they're not bad. They're just, like, unnecessary, and, like, you don't have to read them. Like, the only reason you would read this one is if you're interested in learning about gunfire. And, out of all the characters, I guess he's one of the more interesting ones because there's at least some kind of, like, they try to establish a relationship between him and his father and stuff like that, but there's only so much you can do in one annual to establish a character, and it's just not enough time, to really make a character developed and likable, especially because Gunfire isn't going to be a huge character after this. Like, he's just going to fade into obscurity. I'm pretty sure he's one of the characters that eventually just gets killed off later anyway, so it's like, why am I going to become invested in this character when I know that he isn't going to be alive for long? Like, he's going to be dead in, like, 10 years. Which is a very short time span for a character to exist in the comic book world. 10 years is not very long for a character to exist for that entire character history. And that's 0 appearances in between now and then. But yeah, that's the Deathstroke annual. Not bad, but not great. So the next annual that we're going to be talking about is the Eclipso annual. That's right, Eclipso got his own series after The Darkness Within, and now he has... It went on long enough that he got his own annuals too. I think he gets 2 annuals. I think that's how long it goes on for. Went on for like 24 issues. It's way too long for an Eclipso series. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Eclipso Annual 1, which will be interesting because from the looks of the cover, it looks like Eclipso takes over Angon, because Angon's got like the Eclipso face. So that's interesting. Seems like this might be a crossover of events. I wonder if like The Darkness Within is going to play a role in this. There's going to be like references to that event. Well, we're about to find out. Alright, so Eclipso Annual 1. First off, I want to start off by saying that this is the most violent annual so far. Like, it is insane how gory this is. Like, and it's probably because it was Eclipso, and DC probably didn't even know how violent it was. Like, they probably were just, like, letting it go under the radar, because it's freaking Eclipso. Like, no one was editing this comic. It's so graphic. A woman gets beheaded. There's a guy who gets, like, you can see his rib cages. It's like he's been, like, ripped in half, and his, like, ribs are coming out, and he's just like, ugh. It's messed up. Like, Eclipso smashes 2 guys together, and they explode in, like, a explosion of blood. Like, for a comic that came out at this time in DC, it was very jarring, because DC didn't really make violent stuff unless it was under the Vertigo print, but this isn't under the Vertigo print, so it definitely felt like a black sheep. But basically this issue mostly follows, like, even though the Eclipso series, Eclipso's the main character, like, he's still a villain, so this whole series is usually like Eclipso causing trouble and like Bruce Gordon or some hero trying to stop him, which is an interesting take on a comic book series. This one specifically follows this guy named Linus Powell, who has spent his entire life trying to figure out how to break the light barrier physically. He's done it theoretically, and now he's trying to do it physically. He creates this giant machine that can create... It's like a sun, like a sun that he's created, and it's powered by a black diamond. And Eclipso, he hates solar power stuff, so he comes along and he wants to destroy it. And he actually takes control of the body of Angon, who is a parasite, because she kind of comes just to snack on people. But then while she's there, Eclipso takes control of her and uses her body to, kill people and attack the solar-powered machine. This guy named Johnny Peril shows up, who's trying to film a show about insane things, and he thinks that this giant solar-powered machine is insane, so he goes there to film it, and he hangs out with Linus for the day. So he's there when, like, the facility gets attacked by Eclipso Angon, and Eclipso Angon kills everyone in the entire building except for Linus, and Johnny manages to get away in his helicopter. Linus gets spinal tapped, and then the solar power machine explodes, and the mix of, like, the spinal tap and the machine transforms Linus into a character known as Prism, who is just this person made out of crystals who can shoot light. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is actually the first time that a bunch of these characters who are now known as New Blood come together to create a superhero team known as Blood Pack. This is Blood Pack's official debut. You would think that it would have been at the end of the event, but no, it's this. So, when the explosion happens and Prism finds himself in a massive crater with amnesia, Loose Cannon, Nightblade, Sparks, Edge, and Anima all show up. They've all teamed up together off panel. They've created a team, and they find Prism, and they're like, hey, look, it's a new guy that we can add to our team. And Loose Cannon's just like, I didn't say we were a team, I just kind of brought you along for the ride. So they kind of fight they fight Prism out of a misunderstanding, because Prism thinks that they are evil. Eventually they're able to convince him that they're the good guys and that they want to help stop Eclipso. So they all decide to team up together, and Johnny Peril comes along and is like, hey, Eclipso's attacking this town. You should probably be there and help them. So he takes the New Blood to this town, and they all team up together, and they fight Eclipso, and they beat him, or they save all the people in the town, and then Eclipso is still in Angon's body, so he heads back to the sewers where the parasites have been trying to bring forth the Taker. Was that his name? Remember the, like, big creature that they're trying to create through, like, the fluids that they've been taking from people's spines? He goes there and discovers it. And then he leaves, and then he goes and fights the New Blood. And Eclipso gets taken out of Angon's body. He fights Prism. Prism uses his light powers against him and expels Eclipso from Angon's body, and then Angon gets away and leaves. They find her footprints, and they're just like, oh, I guess the parasite got away. And Eclipso got away as well. And, yeah, that's that. And at the end of this, it says, the adventures of Prism and the other New Blood characters continue in Bloodbath 1. But that's not what we're reading next. The annual that we're reading next is The Demon Annual 2, written by Garth Ennis, who was writing Bloodlines at the time. If you don't know who Garth Ennis is, he's known for creating The Boys and Preacher, and he wrote Punisher for a long time, and Constantine. So, like, he's very known for, like, writing very, like, grim, dark, grimy, violent characters. So he was tasked with writing The Demon, which is one of the most obscure things I think he's written for, like, DC or Marvel. And the reason why this Demon Annual is pretty well known is because it introduces a character known as Hitman. And Hitman is one of the only characters in Bloodlines to not only get their own series, but to have that series go on for a long time. To the point where, like, eventually Garth Ennis kills off Hitman and, like, ends the series. Like, that's how long it goes on for. It goes on for, like, 50 issues, I think, which is a very long time. And Hitman would go on to appear in, like, tons of crossovers with, like, Batman. He would appear in later events. He would have his own tie-ins. Like, this character was very popular, and it came from this. So we're about to see Hitman's origin. So let's see if it's any good. So the Etrigan Annual 2 is actually quite enjoyable. It's very weird and wacky. I think it's up there as like when Garth Ennis is writing something that's like an established character and he has some like he's not allowed to do whatever he wants, so he can't go as far as he does with the boys, which is some of the worst examples of his writing. He could be a good writer if he's got somebody there being like, all right, Garth, that's enough. And I feel like that was the case with the Demon, where he was given enough wiggle room to like have his particular style and to have it be like gory and weird and wacky. But there was Nedada being like, all right, but don't no pedophiles, no weird shit. So this one mostly follows our new character Hitman, who is Tommy Monaghan. He is a pretty straightforward character. He's a hitman, and he's kind of he is a lot like Frank Castle in terms of like his personality of just being this guy that's kind of just like, I'm just getting shit done. I'm just doing my job. You give me a hit, I'll do it. I'll kill him. Done. He's an alcoholic. We don't really know a lot about him. He's got a friend named Pat who he gets all of his weapons and clothes from. So basically, like Jason Blood, aka, the other half of Etrigan, is talking to Etrigan about the parasites, and he's basically like, since the parasites didn't come from heaven or hell, that means that we have no reason to take part in this. And Etrigan is like, yes, Jason Blood, but what you don't understand is that, like, we're going to meet a man who, like, blasts people's heads off and guts all over the street. Like, that's our destiny. We're going to meet this guy, and it involves the parasites. Meanwhile, Tommy is doing a hit on this mob boss, which gets ruined by a parasite, Glonth. The parasite comes in and kills him, and so Tommy's like, shit. And then he gets attacked by Glonth, and he gets spinal tapped by Glonth, and then he passes out. And when he ends up in the hospital, that's when he discovers his powers. So he has X-ray vision, and he also has telepathy. And it causes him to freak out. He thinks he's in hell because he can see like the skeletons of the doctors and stuff. So Tommy decides that he wants to, because he couldn't kill the boss, the other members know that he was trying to kill the boss because they find his gun at the scene. So they know that Tommy was trying to kill him and that he didn't get the chance to. So these mob bosses are going to try and kill Tommy now, this gang. They're led by the mob boss of this gang is called Mo and Joe. They are Siamese, not Siamese twins. They are conjoined twins. So it's like literally two guys together. Which is the first time I've ever seen that before. Like, that's pretty interesting for a character. To have a mob boss be conjoined twins. So yeah, their whole thing is they're going after Tommy. But before they do that, like they've sent guys to go and kill Tommy, and at the same time they're having a wake for their boss at their home. Obviously the two guys that they send to go kill Tommy fail because Tommy kills them. He goes and sees his friend Pat, and like that's when he comes up with his name Hitman, where he's like, I'm not Tommy Monaghan anymore, I'm Hitman now. So Tommy goes to a party that Jason Blood is at, and because some of the mob members are there, and Glonth shows up and attacks the party, and so like Etrigan and Glonth fight each other, and like that's when Etrigan figures out about Jason Blood and Etrigan discover that the mob is going after Tommy, and that Tommy is going to try and kill them. So Jason wants to beat Tommy to the punch and get to the mob first and stop them before, because he would prefer it if Tommy didn't gun them all down. So he decides to go to the wake because he knows Tommy is going to be there, and so they both head there to fight the mob. And then Glomp is there too, the parasite, and so he shows up at the wake in a massive blood battle, gunfire, blood and guts, Glomp killing people, Hitman shooting people down, Etrigan killing people as well. It's really messed up because, like, Joe and Mo, like, I think it's Mo gets, like, his head blown off, but Joe is still alive, and so, like, he's stuck with the body of his dead brother. It's pretty fucked up, and he's like, I'm gonna get revenge, Monaghan. And so I'm assuming that for, like, the rest of the Hitman's run, because it seems like Joe has been, like, set up to be Tommy Monaghan's, like, arch nemesis. It means that the rest of this run is probably going to be him with, like, hauling around his dead body, like his dead brother, because they're conjoined, which is fucked up. Glomp is defeated by Tommy because he throws a grenade into his mouth, which blows open his guts. He doesn't die, but, like, he's got a massive hole in his stomach with his guts spilling out. So Glomp is like, runs away off to his lair to heal. And then Etrigan and Tommy decide to go their separate ways. Like most other annuals, it usually ends with the hero and this new character being like, hey, you could probably do some good. Alright, I'll probably never see you again. We're never going to team up again. But Etrigan this time is just like, I have a feeling you're going to have a pretty successful series that's going to have a definitive ending. I don't know why. I feel like that's the case. And yeah, that's where we leave off. It just leaves off with Glomp gets away. Joe declares revenge against Tommy, and Tommy begins his new life as the character Hitman. Vigilante, I guess is what you would call him. Yeah. So now that annual is over, the next annual that we're going to be talking about is another Batman one. Batman Legends of the Dark Knight Annual 3. Guest starring Cardinal Sin. And I feel like I remember this one because I think this is one of the Bloodlines characters that is talked about a lot because of how ridiculous it is. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out. I also think that this is further into Nightfall. It's far enough in now that Azrael has officially changed his bat costume and he now has, like, his super 90s bat armor that he makes for himself gradually throughout Nightfall. So he has that now. It's written by Denny O'Neil, with art by Mike Manley, Luke McDonnell, and Graham Morrow. So since it's written by Denny, he's a good Batman writer. I would expect this to probably be good, right? Let's find out. So Legend of the Dark Knight Annual 3, written by Denny O'Neil. This is one of the... I think this is one of my least favorite annuals. I think this is one of the worst ones. Because, like, this feels like Denny was writing a parody, and he probably was. Like, he probably wrote this and was like, I'm just gonna write the weirdest story I can come up with and just make this, like, just bad on purpose because they're not going to give me royalties for these characters I'm being asked to create. So, the characters he creates in this story are known as Cardinal and Good Samaritan. The worst characters so far. So, Good Samaritan is a man named Luke Hames, and Cardinal Sin is a man named Perry Dennison, and they are half-brothers. So the issue begins with Luke Hames holding his half-brother at gunpoint and a bunch of kids. He's holding them all hostage, basically saying that, like, something terrible is going to happen and they'd rather be dead than, be dealing with that. His half-brother is trying to talk him down the whole time, and then Angon, the parasite, shows up and sucks both of their spinal fluids out. And it's funny because, like, This is the only time that Angon shows up in the whole issue. The rest of the issue just deals with them getting their powers. Batman doesn't even show up until halfway through the annual, which it's still the Jean-Paul Valley version. And what's also really funny is that, like, Luke Hames gets his spinal tap first, and then Perry tries to talk down Angon, and it's just like, you don't want to attack me, like, you're only doing this for protection, to protect yourself, and he gets spinal tapped anyway. And then, when they wake up, their roles are reversed, so Perry just becomes evil, because he realizes that, like, trying to be a good person got him nowhere, and so now he thinks his job is to punish the wicked, and so he finds this woman in a van. Like, Luke Hames is going to be taken into the police because he's still on, like, the criminal radar. So the police come to grab Luke. Luke also has powers, and because they're both flipped now after the attack, Luke has become a good guy, Perry's become a bad guy. So when the cops show up, Perry kills both of them and then runs away. Because he has the ability to kill people by touching them, like aging them rapidly. So he runs away and finds a van with a woman in it, and then, like, kills her and takes some clothes that she had in her van, which just happened to be, like, a bishop suit, but it looks like a supervillain suit, so he puts that on, and he becomes Cardinal Sin, and there's literally a line where he's just like, yes, evil rules. Like, he literally says that. It's so ridiculous. He's like, evil rules. Luke brings one of the deputy sheriff back to life, and that's when he discovers that he has the ability to heal people, and then the sheriff says, like, you're a good Samaritan, and that's where he gets that name. So Luke decides to try and go after his brother, but because he's still a listed criminal, Harvey Bullock, lets Batman know that Luke Hames is in the area, and Batman is looking for Perry because they already know that Perry's been killing people, so he's investigating. So he goes to find Luke Hames in order to get information about Perry. So a couple of policemen are taking Luke Hames in, and they try to kill him in order to get gold badges, but then Batman shows up and beats the crap out of him, and then takes Luke Hames away, and also beats up a bunch of other police who show up at the scene as well. And meanwhile, Cardinal Sin heads to a church where he meets this bishop who he really looks up to, and it turns out the only reason he's found this bishop is because he believes that the bishop is lying about all the good things that he does, and that he doesn't actually care, and that he should deserve to die for that. He actually succeeds in killing the bishop as Good Samaritan and Batman show up. And that's when, like, Perry tries to get away. Luke brings the bishop back to life and then attacks Perry, and their powers cancel each other out, and Perry loses his powers, and Luke ends up in a coma. And that's kind of where it ends. It just ends with Perry just being like, give me back my powers. He, like, heads back to the place where he got his powers, and he's just like, I pray to you, give me my powers. And then, like, Luke is just in a coma. And this sucked. It wasn't good. I didn't like it. The art was good. I liked the art, but, like, the whole issue is just, like, it's so overly religious. I don't, like, I'm not a religious guy. So, like, when I'm reading an annual and it's just all about, like, religion and shit, I'm just like, no thank you. This isn't my thing. Like, you know? So, that's that annual. And the next annual that we're going to be talking about is, I think it's one of the final annuals before the two-part final to Bloodlines. So the next one we're talking about is Team Titans Annual 1. written by Marv Wolfman. If you don't know who the Teen Titans are, hold on to your seat because I'm about to explain everything. Because I'm reading the Titans at the moment, so I can explain who they are. Alright, so, who are the Teen Titans? Before we get into this story, I've got to explain who the Teen Titans are. They did actually show up in a previous Teen Titans annual. I didn't really know who they were at the time because I hadn't gone that far into Teen Titans, but now I know who they are. So the Teen Titans is a team of Titans from the future, from a possible future, ruled by this guy named Lord Chaos, who is the son of Donna Troy and Terry Long. He killed his own parents and then took over the future. The Teen Titans are like the next generation of the Teen Titans. They consist of Dagon, who is just a Morbius ripoff, Redwing, who is literally just Hawkgirl, Mirage, who you probably know who she is if you read DC Comics, especially if you read Nightwing, you know who Mirage is. Kilowatt, who is he's kind of like the Human Torch if he was made out of electricity. That's basically what Kilowatt is. And then Terra, who is not the same Terra as the one that Changeling knew. She's a different Terra, and she comes from the future. And I don't know anything about her, and I don't know what her origin is, because Marv doesn't say. He probably does in Teen Titans. You could probably find more. Like, I'm not reading Teen Titans, so I don't know, but they probably explain her past in that. But yeah, in the main Teen Titans title, she says to Changeling that she's not the same Terra that he knew, but, like, she's still his love interest, but, like, the reader knows nothing about her, and we're not giving any hints as to, like, who she is. Like, is she a clone? Is she the daughter of Terra? Or whatever? Like, is she related to her in any way? This annual is pretty straightforward. It begins with the Teen Titans fighting Angon. The parasite is in this one. It's Dagon fighting Angon. He has, like, a bat form that he can turn into. And then he gets, like, his spine fluid sucked out. But because he's a vampire guy, like, he's pretty much immortal, so he can't really die from that kind of thing. So he just gets taken to the hospital and given a blood transfusion. This story mostly focuses on a character known as what was her name? It was like Sundry or something. Sanjeet. So Sanjeet is a friend of Redwing. I don't know if she's actually a character in Teen Titans or if she was created for this annual, but she's a friend of Redwing. Basically, Sanjeet just has an awful life. Like, her parents, like, her dad is abusive to her mum. She's, like, Sanjeet is on drugs. And that's actually what eventually leads to her getting powers. So, because she's on drugs, she just decides to go off driving. And because she's out of it, because she's with her dad, and her dad is, like, really angry that she's on drugs, and Sanjeet just runs away and, like, gets into a car and, like, drives off. And so Redwing goes after the car to find Sanjeet, because she feels like Sanjeet is in trouble. She just has that feeling. And Angon comes and attacks Sanjeet's car and sucks out her spinal fluid. And so Redwing shows up and grabs Sanjeet and is like, I gotta get her to the hospital. And she takes Sanjeet to the hospital, and that's where we discover that Sanjeet now has powers. She becomes this character known as Chimera, who basically has the ability to create, like, entire fabrications of worlds, but they're not like, it's not like an illusion. She actually she changes reality while she's on drugs. So it's just weird, messed up stuff that she creates. So, like, she turns the entire hospital room into the Wizard of Oz. And because Dagon is in there, he ends up fighting the Wicked Witch of the West. And then manages to wake her up, and she stops doing that. And because she's on drugs and because she hates her life, this whole issue is Sanjeet trying to kill herself. She, like, creates space so that she runs out of oxygen and dies. And they try to stop her from killing herself. and so, like, Mirage goes to, like, stop her, and Sanjeet places Mirage in a world where, like, she's being tortured by Lord Chaos. Eventually they manage to get through to Mirage. Mirage goes and actually finds her not Mirage, Sanjeet, Chimera, goes and finds her parents and kind of shows her dad his worst nightmares, and that's what forces him to stop beating her mum. And then her mum is the one that manages to get through to Sanjeet and talk to her and convince her to wind down her powers and stop what she's doing and value her life. And so Sanjeet stops using her powers. And then at the very end, they're kind of just like, and like her parents are free of this nightmare forever. So it's like, oh, I guess Sanjeet just doesn't have powers anymore. Or, like, she does have powers, but she would have to do drugs again in order for her powers to come up again. Yeah. So that's how it ends. It ends like that. It just ends with Sanjeet deciding not to kill herself anymore. The drugs run out. She loses her powers. And then her family gets to live happily ever after. And hopefully her dad just gets, like, his ass beat for being an abusive asshole. Yeah, this annual is not bad. It's not as bad as the Cardinal Sin one and Good Samaritan one, but like this is 90s Marv Wolfman, so it's like very mediocre. And also I just don't care about the Teen Titans. And you know it means a lot when it's like, I'm reading Teen Titans. I read the series that introduced them. There's a whole arc involving them. And I've had a really hard time caring about them because they're not a very likable team and they aren't very likable characters, especially Mirage. Like, she's one of the worst characters in DC history. If you're interested in learning more about her, I'd recommend going and looking it up. But just a caution, it's pretty messed up what she does. Yeah, that annual was just nothing. Like, it was just kind of like, yeah, a one-off story that, you know, it looks like the character introduced in this isn't actually going to show up again because she loses her powers. But who knows? Maybe she will. But that's enough of that annual, because the next annual we're going to be talking about is Legion. I thought the Teen Titans one was the final one, but apparently there is one more, and then once we're done with Legion, we got the 2-part Bloodbath final, and then we'll be done with Bloodlines. So yeah, I'm at the point where I'm looking forward to this event just ending. There have been some annuals that I've enjoyed, but like it's few and far between. So the Legion annual, this one is actually quite important overall. Like, you could still skip it, but like it does have like a couple of important things to know. It's Legion Annual 4. Basically, this annual involves the Legion. It continues pretty much right after the original, like the Lobo annual, where the Legion are still investigating the parasites, and they come across a planet that is on fire. We think it's a sun, but it turns out it's actually a planet. So Quell decides to send down a couple of people, Lobo, Captain Comet, and Lila, from the Lobo annual, to go down and scout out the planet. And when they go down there, they come across this guy named Pax, who is the only person left alive on the planet. So the rest of the crew all land on the planet after Pax has a massive blowout with Lobo. So Quell goes down there in order to tell him, like, hey, we're good guys, we're here to help. And that's when Pax tells them his origins, which is basically the parasites came to their planet and killed everyone. And they're like, what about you? Like, how did you survive? And Pax is like, it wasn't by God or anything. Like, they tried to kill me, like, a lot. Like, they killed me over and over again, but every time they did it, I kept getting more and more powerful. So it seems like if you get your spine sucked out multiple times, you get more powerful. so you can have it happen to you more than once and get even stronger. And so, for the rest of the annual, the Legion helps Pax fight against the parasites on his world, where, like, he's created a bomb in order to destroy the parasites' lair, which is like a mountain. And one of the members of the Legion actually finds out that, like, the readings coming from the mountain are not exactly the same as the parasites, and that there's something different about it. And Queldox just wants the bomb because he wants to take it back to Earth in order to use it to save Earth. But Captain Comet is like, no, like, he made this bomb, this is his life work, we should allow him to use it to save his planet. But the parasites catch on to his, onto his plan, and they come out and they fight the Legion and Pax. And then, the parasites, like, mother on this planet rises, and it's like this giant green parasite with tiny little larvae parasites on it. It's really gross. And so Pax is like, I'm gonna set the bomb so that it blows up, and Queldox is like, your planet is basically done for. So please, just give us the bomb so we can save our planet, because if you use it here, we can't save our world. And there's nothing here for you to save anyway. And so Pax ends up going like, alright, and he turns off the bomb, and they flee from the planet because they can't defeat the giant parasite. So they flee from the planet, and Pax wants to stay behind originally to die with his planet, but then he decides to go with them. He manages to get some memorabilia with him, and they pull him onto the ship just in time as they jump into hyperspace. And then it ends with them being like, alright, we got the bomb, so now we can head back to planet Earth, and we can use it to save everyone. And that's where it ends. It ends with them kind of like going back to Earth with this bomb that's hopefully going to allow them to save Earth. And we'll find out what happens next in Bloodbaths 1 and 2, which is the official finale to Bloodlines. So here we are, we're at the grand final. Let's go. So, Bloodbath issue 1. It's one of those things where it's like 58 pages, but not a lot actually happens, you know? Like, if I go deep into this and I explain literally every single thing that happens, we're gonna be here forever, because it's like a lot of characters doing the same thing. You know, so if I'm just like, oh, this character's doing this one's doing that, it's going to take me forever to get through this. So it's kind of like, try to summarize this up while still explaining the story well enough. It's written by Dan Raspler with art by Chuck Wojciechowicz, Agop Gemgian, Bill Willingham, and Keith Wilson. So, the parasites are taking over Earth. The news is talking about it. And only one woman is capable of rallying the heroes together and finding a way to destroy the parasites. And that woman is Amanda Waller. So, Guy Gardner goes and he finds Amanda Waller, and they get all the heroes together like they do in every event, and Amanda Waller tells them what the plan is. The plan is that they're all gonna go out, and they're just gonna look for the parasites. That's the plan. The plan is to look for the parasites, and then hopefully, when they find the parasites, learn where they come from. So the heroes are all sent out to find the parasites. A plane gets attacked by Glonth, so the Justice League of America are sent to the plane in order to deal with him, and when they get there, there's a massive fight that happens with Glonth, which ends with Glonth being defeated by Guy Gardner, and so they take Glonth back to their base, and they start trying to figure out if they can dissect his brain to figure out where to go. And that's when Praetor shows up to free Glonth. The Eradicator is there. He's no longer a Superman because Superman is back to life now by this point. So Eradicator is there, and so he helps defeat Praetor and Glonth, and before they are defeated, like before Eradicator decides to like keep him prisoner, Praetor and Glonth mention about how their lair is in a swamp, because they're like, well, we gotta go back to the swamp because that's where our lair is. And then Eradicator's like, oh, that's great to know. And they're like, ah, shit, we just gave away our plan. Like, we gave away the location of our lair. So, the heroes go to the swamp to find the lair, while Eradicator stays behind to keep an eye on Glonth and Praetor. But then a third parasite comes behind and, like, knocks Eradicator out. And so Glonth, Praetor, and I think it's Lizik all leave to go to the swamp. The heroes make their way to the swamp. They find the lair. Superman tries to open it up with his heat vision, but the lair just opens up anyway. And so a bunch of the heroes infiltrate the lair, and some of them actually find like a hole in the lair and they fall down into it. Eventually it's revealed that this hole leads directly to where the parasites are keeping the Taker. I think I called him the Wanderer earlier. His name is the Taker. He's the same kind of creature that we saw in the Legion Annual, which is just a giant parasite. The Flash decides to scope the area to see if he can find any parasites, and while he's doing that, he sees the New Bloods. And he's just like, ah, shit, why are the New Bloods here, and how do they know where this lair is? And also, why do I even think that they're good guys? Because he's just like, he calls them heroes, and he's like, why do I think they're heroes? I mean, I met that one guy, and he was cool, but I don't know about everyone else. I don't know if I can trust them. The New Bloods found out about the parasites from watching the news. Like, they saw the news and they were like, alright, we gotta go stop them. And I'm guessing that they found the lair because they have a connection to the parasites. They don't specifically say, but that's probably what it is. So the heroes have infiltrated the parasite's lair. They find where the Taker is, and a massive battle with the parasites ensues. They all start fighting each other. The Atom goes inside Angon and then, like, rips apart, like, the inside of her nose and shit. So that's kind of important because he basically takes down Angon. But then the weirdest thing happens. The parasites say that they are the seeds to the Taker's birth, and they willingly jump into the juices that the Taker is within, and the Taker eats them, eats the parasites, and then is reborn. And so the Taker emerges, everyone starts getting attacked by tentacles. The Taker grabs a whole bunch of heroes, like Wonder Woman and stuff, and pulls them into the juices. So the other heroes are like, ah, shit, he got him. Like, he got a bunch of us. And so Superman's like, alright, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna see what I can do, possibly save our friends if they're still alive. And so he, like, goes in, he flies down to where the Taker is, and it ends with Superman confronting the Taker. And it's like, will Superman be able to succeed? Find out in the next issue of Bloodbath. And so that's where the first issue of Bloodbath ends. Some of the annuals were definitely better than this, because even though this is the culmination of the entire event, not a lot happens until the very end, and even then, it's not that interesting, because, like, instead of us just having a simple fight, it's like the characters are constantly talking during it, so there's so much reading, and it's not fun reading a fight scene in a comic book that has a million speech bubbles. Like, I don't want that. When I have two characters fighting each other, I just want to see them fighting each other. I don't need them to be having inner monologues all the time and just talking while they're fighting, you know? Like, you can have moments where they stop fighting, they talk a little bit, and keep fighting, but when they're throwing blows, no speech bubbles. Except for, like, grunts and stuff. Please. Like, that's just my preference. So much dialogue in this. It took me forever to get through this. It was a very slow read. And it's only issue 1. Let's hope issue 2 is better, because this is kind of the setup for issue 2, so maybe issue 2 is better than this. I'm hoping that the climax is satisfying. So I guess we're about to find out, because we're about to read the final issue of Bloodbath and the Bloodlines event. So let's get straight to it. Bloodbath issue 2. So, Bloodbath Part 2. Bloodbath Part 2 is essentially just a giant fight for the entire issue, and so if I go into detail and be like, this is what every single New Blood does during the fight, we're gonna be here forever. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about the important things that happen, and I'll mention which New Bloods actually do something that actually, like, damage the giant parasite, the Taker. Because there are a couple characters that actually do severe damage to him, and they do unique things, so I'll mention those things. So basically what happens is, all of the heroes have been absorbed by the Taker. Superman and Flash are the only heroes that haven't been. So Superman's like, oh shit, I gotta figure out what to do, and that's when he sees the Flash, and he sees the Flash with the New Bloods. And so he goes and he visits the Flash and the New Bloods. I'm not going to mention any of the characters outside of, like, those few that... There's so many characters. Like, there are a few that do important things, so I'll mention them by name. But I feel like everyone else, I'm just going to refer to them as the New Bloods. So Superman and Flash and the New Bloods decide that they need to go and kill the Taker. The Taker is currently, like, making its way across the land, creating a giant trench. It has a paralysis field, but it turns out that the New Bloods aren't affected by it, so they're able to go in and attack it. So some of them do, like Mongrel and Sparks. Meanwhile, Amanda Waller unites with Maggie Sawyer, and they basically just head off to get away from the Taker and kind of monitor the New Bloods fighting the Taker, because most of DC's superheroes don't do anything in this issue. Superman does. Like, Superman doesn't really fight the Taker very much throughout this issue. Instead, he goes off to find a way to weaken the Taker, which is its roots that are under the ground. So, like, he goes under the ground, he finds the roots, he blasts the roots in order to make it so that the Taker is easy to topple over. Meanwhile, the Flash actually heads inside the Taker. He finds a way inside, and Wally finds, like, its stomach, and some of the New Bloods go in there with him, and that's where they find all the heroes in, like, these weird stomach, like, pods, and they break all the heroes out and set them free. Razor Sharp does some damage to the Taker. She, like, slices it open. Gunfire does a lot in this. He uses a pipe to blast the Taker, and then later on he grabs, like, a big railroad track and uses that as a laser, as a weapon, and shoots the Taker with that, and that does quite a bit of damage. And then he grabs a train and he shoots a blast out the front of the train, and that does quite a bit of damage. But the real hero here is definitely Anima. I mean, it's technically all of them. They do kind of an anime thing in this, where, like, all the New Bloods are like, alright, let's combine all our powers together into one final attack. And so what they do is Anima summons her beast form that she can summon, and then Edge is like, I'll throw my knives in there, and Mongrel's like, and here's my negative energy, and they all fuse their powers together into Anima's beast form that she can summon, and then that fights the Taker. There's a massive fight that ensues between Anima's beast spirit, and the Taker. Also, Nightblade dies in this for a brief moment. He gets his neck snapped, but then at the end of the issue, he just goes, and he's like, I'm all good. I'm alive. Just thought that would be funny to mention, because that happens. He just gets thrown off and his neck's snapped. And then he comes back at the end, he's like, yeah, I'm alive. But yeah, Anima's beast form fights the Taker, and beats it. Kills it. That's basically what the final battle is that, like, yeah, they just all put all their powers together into one final assault, and they win. The Taker is defeated. The heroes, like the DC heroes, all arrive, like Green Lantern and all that, Wonder Woman, and everyone, and they take the Taker's body into space, and they throw it into the sun. And then that's it. Like, they throw the Taker's body into the sun. Quel'Dox is like, man, I really wanted to study the body of the Taker and learn a bit more about it. And Lobo's just like, hey, there's probably more parasites out there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Maybe we'll find more of them. And then it ends with Nightblade coming back. That's the moment, like, that's how it ends. It ends with Nightblade cracking his neck and just being like, hey, I'm alive. And he unites with Ballistic, and they head off into the sunset. And that's it. That's Bloodlines. I do definitely think that, like, Part 2 was better than Part 1, because Part 1 was just nothing but, like, setup for Part 2. Part 2 was at least, like, an actual battle, but my issue with some battles in comics came about with this one because there's a lot of unnecessary dialogue during the fights, where it's the characters having to say everything that they're doing while they're fighting the Taker, instead of just showing us them fighting it. Like, I'm fine with characters saying things every now and then, but, like, when you have speech bubbles in every single panel of a fight, it's just like, man, just let me see the fight. I just want to look at this cool fight. I don't want speech bubbles getting in the way, you know, of characters saying these things that aren't necessary, of them being like, oh man, I'm punching him in the face right now. Oh yeah, I'm so strong right now. Hey, you're pretty strong too. Yeah, we're both punching him. Like, that's basically all the dialogue is. But yeah, like, it was fine. I'd say this climax was better than Armageddon's final battle. And I think I would actually rank Bloodlines above Armageddon. And then I think I would, like, rank Bloodlines as, like, equal to Eclipso. Because I think they were equal in how many tie-ins I liked and how many tie-ins I hated or didn't like. I think they're, like, equal. But Armageddon is, like, below that. Of, like, that whole event is just, like, ugh. But yeah, that was Bloodlines. Overall, it's bad. I mean, people went wrong about that. You know, they were right. It is a bad event. Is it the worst event that I've read? No, definitely not. I think when people say it's the worst event DC's ever made, I think it's the most, like, tasteless. Like, I think it's the most, like they definitely sold... They definitely sold out when they made this one, because it's just a clear, like, of DC just being like, we gotta be like Image. But I think this event overall is better than War of the Gods, because at least this one has cohesion and it makes sense. You know, War of the Gods was just a confusing mess. Like, War of the Gods is actually hard to read. That's how confusing it is. You read it and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? At least in this, you're just like, I know what's going on. It's weird, but I know what's going on. You know, the plot made sense. So yeah, like, read Bloodlines if you want. You know, maybe use this podcast as a guide of, like, what tie-ins you should read and what ones you shouldn't. Basically, just read all the ones that I said were good. And then read the important stuff, like Lobo, Adventures of Superboy, like Superman, Bloodbath. In the end, the Legion one didn't even end up being important. I read that one and I was like, oh man, this one's actually important to Bloodbath because of the bomb. But the bomb doesn't even show up in Bloodbath. The bomb that Pact had that had the power to destroy a Taker, and the Legion were like, hey, let's grab that bomb and use it on, like, planet Earth. They never ended up using it, and they don't even mention it once in this. It's like they forgot about it. I think that's what happens when you have multiple writers, writing the entire event together, because you're doing it in the annuals as different chapters. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on any further because I don't really want to talk about Bloodlines anymore, and I want to move on because I've been talking about Bloodlines for 2 weeks straight now, and it's time for me to move on from it and forget about it like I do with all other events. That's the thing that I find is like a power of mine, is that I could read a really bad, like I can read a story and then never think about it again. You know, the power of autism. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this episode of Midlife Crisis, and that's actually the final episode of Midlife Crisis for this season of the podcast. Next week we got one more episode of Flash Forward, where we will be doing all of the Flash issues up to issue 0, and then that'll be it for season 1 of the podcast. I'll be taking a week break after that, and then I'll come back with something special, something special that'll be in between this season and the next season of like Midlife Crisis and Flash Forward, and you know, continuing the DC stuff. There's it's gonna be a Marvel thing. I'm gonna do a Marvel related thing in between before we do 0 Hour. So you'll find out what that is next week. I will announce it. I've already announced it on Twitter anyway. I've already said what I'm going to be doing, but yeah, I'll be revealing what that is next week on the podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode, rate the podcast if you can. Follow it, please. You know, if you rate it, it will show up in people's recommendations and stuff, so we'll be able to get more people to you know, possibly listen to this. And I think if you follow it as well, it will probably like recommend it to people, because you know, when it gains traction, if it ever gains traction, you know, Spotify will start recommending it to people, which is the goal that I would hope to eventually get to. But yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. Hope you have a good day, a good night, good evening, wherever you are. Good morning, if you're somewhere where it's morning. And I hope to see you next week for more Flash. So see you then, and have a good one.